Thanks for being with us on AM Agenda. With me this morning, Scott Morrison and Jason Clare. Scott, I want to ask you about this report in the Herald today. Suggestions that since the government announced its tougher approach to the processing of asylum seekers from Afghanistan and Sri Lanka, that the numbers have fallen by a quarter since that April announcement. So that seems to be working, does it not?
No. I mean, we've had 31 boats since that decision. We've had 8 boats in the last 12 days. We've had more than 300 people turn up this month. So if that's success, if that is success under this government, under their policies on border protection, I would hate to see failure. I mean, we've got more than 3 boats per week arriving since that decision.
But isn't that less in terms of percentage than the 3 months prior to that?
Oh, this is like, no, it's
25% less, isn't it?
No, we've got 31 boats here and we've got 1,400 people who have arrived. We only had 300 people, less than 300 people, arrive in the last 6 years of the Howard government. So if this is success, and the government themselves said that they didn't think it would stop the boats, and it hasn't. We've actually had more actual boats arrive than in the same corresponding period before that decision. So this is a policy, let's be clear, this is a policy that says if you're an Afghan or you're a Sri Lankan, we are not going to assess your claim. We're going to freeze that assessment for 6 months and potentially longer. You are now going to go to a remote camp in Western Australia at the Curtin Detention Centre, a centre closed by the Howard government, and you're going to end up in a range of other remote camps all around Australia. Now, apparently, this is the humanitarian approach of the Rudd government, but yet the boats continue to arrive. So it's as ineffective as it is discriminatory.
Well, the boats continue to arrive. There was another one yesterday, and despite the apparent reduction, according to the numbers in the Herald today, Jason, it's still heading towards the highest number of unauthorised arrivals in a year. Are you worried about the politics of this issue? Is this, the sleeper issue that people don't recognise? There is a view that the shift against Kevin Rudd that we've seen manifest in the last few weeks began last year with the Oceanic Viking and the bungled handling of that case.
It is a tough issue, and people have got strong views on both sides of the debate. I think you'd recognise that, mate. What I'm disappointed at is that there used to be bipartisanship on this policy area back before 1993, and since then bipartisanship has disappeared. But beneath the political debate that you see in the newspapers and on television, if you look at the policies, you find that the policies of the Labor Party and the Liberal Party are 95% the same. We all agree on most things, except for 2 things, and that is temporary protection visas and the Pacific solution. And the reason the government doesn't support either of those is because they don't work. And Scott knows that because well, hang on a sec. I'll let you speak. Okay. If Scott seriously thought that what he's putting up, what Tony Abbott is putting up, would work, then he would have answered the questions at the press conference a couple of weeks ago, where they were asked for a guarantee, and they said to Tony Abbott 3 times, "Will you guarantee that this will stop the boats?" And he was asked the question time after time after time, and he refused to answer it because he knows that this policy is a sham. He knows it's like one of those presents you get on Christmas Day. Very popular until you find out it doesn't work. So my question to you, Scott, is will you guarantee...
Let's go to the record. No, let's go to
talking policy.
43 boats arrived in 2001. 43 boats. And after 2001, the full suite of measures came into play. What was described as the Pacific solution, temporary protection visas, all of these came into play. The number of boats went to 1 and then went for 6 years, an average of just 3 boats a year and 50 people, less than 50 people per year. Now, when you changed temporary protection visas in August of 2008, and in particular when you showed a complete, not you personally, but the Prime Minister showed a complete absence of resolve in the Oceanic Viking, we are now at a rate of 3 per week. There are 452 children who are being detained today. When we left office, there were just 21. And I think those figures speak for themselves in terms of the success of the Howard government's policies and the failure of the Rudd government's policies. There's a clear choice. Jason's right about this. This is not a debate about whether 13,750 refugees and others should come under our refugee and humanitarian program. We agree about that. We also agree in the settlement policies that have been employed by this government and the previous government. The difference of view is how people come.
Just quickly, your response. There's one other issue I want to ask you about.
Well, my response would be this. When is the Liberal Party going to answer the question, will you guarantee that what you're proposing will stop the boats? If they don't answer that question, then they can't be trusted on this issue.
Jason, just finally, in your electorate electorate yesterday, we saw that that terrible plane crash. It was in Canley Vale in Sydney. It is in the seat of Blaxland. You're the local member. What's the latest? Have you spoken to the local principal? What's the latest on the ground?
Yeah. Well, first, a terrible tragedy. 2 people lost their lives yesterday, which is in the hearts and minds of everybody. But it could have been even worse. I spoke to the principal late last night. She told me that the plane crashed around about 8:10, 8:15. But if the plane had crashed about 20 minutes later, then it could have been a lot worse, because that's when kids would have been dropped off at school, and they would have been all along the street and all along the pavement there. As it is, there was a car that had to dodge the plane and was very lucky that the father and the kids were able to escape with their lives. So we're very grateful for that. 2 people lost their lives. It's an eerie feeling when you see a place that you know so well on television. I used to play most of my cricket at the park across the road. My mum works around the corner. So it's a terrible tragedy for my electorate, and our hearts are with the families of those 2 people today.
Absolutely. Thank goodness it wasn't worse than what it was. But appreciate your thoughts on that and your time, Scott and Jason. Thanks.
Thanks, mate.
That's all for our chat with our politicians panel. Let's look at the day ahead on the markets. It's been a bumper night on global markets. Brooke Corty from the Sky